Lab5 scenario, log collection and forwarding. In this section, you will use Panorama to configure both firewalls with log forwarding profiles. You will configure both firewalls to send traffic, URL filtering, and threat log events to Panorama so that you have an enterprise view of traffic in your organization. Your organization uses a syslog server to collect important events from network hosts. You will configure both firewalls to send all threat log events to your syslog server. You also want email notifications for critical threat events sent from the firewalls to your administration team. Lab objectives. Create a default log forwarding profile, modify security rules to use a default log forwarding profile, create a new security policy rule to see effect of default log. Forwarding profile, create Panorama Server profiles, forward Panorama system, and config log events, generate traffic, and verify log forwarding. Note that the configuration you load in this lab has additional components, including a new zone and security policy rules. These have been added for later tasks you will perform for logging and monitoring. High-level lab steps. Load the lab start configuration file. Detailed lab steps. Load the lab start configuration file. In the Panorama web interface, navigate to Panorama greater than setup greater than operations. Click load named Panorama configuration snapshot. Use the drop-down list for name to select EDU 220-11A Labanus 5 start dex ML. Leave the remaining settings unchanged. Click OK to close the load named configuration window. Click close on the loading configuration window. Commit the changes to Panorama by selecting the commit greater than commit to Panorama in the upper right corner of the window. In the commit to Panorama window, click commit. Allow the process to complete. Click close in the commit status window. Push the configuration to firewalls. Select commit greater than push to devices. Click edit selections. Select the device groups tab and verify that the checkboxes for the Berlin FW firewall and the Chicago FW firewall are selected. Select the force template values checkbox at the bottom. Click yes on the force template values warning message. On the templates tab, verify that the checkboxes for the Chicago firewall and the Berlin firewall are selected. Click OK. Click push to start the process. Wait until the commit all jobs are complete. Click close. Create a default log forwarding profile. You want all firewalls in your organization to send copies of their log file entries to Panorama. In this section, you will create a log forwarding profiles called default. You will create the profile in the shared device group so that it is available in all descendant device groups. You will define rules in the log forwarding profile to send log file entries from the firewalls to Panorama. You will include rules for traffic, URL filtering, threat, and wildfire log entries. You also will define rules that send all threat log events to your syslog server and only critical threat log events to email. You will use the name default for this log forwarding profile so that Panorama automatically assigns this log forwarding profile to any new security policy rule you create. Select objects greater than log forwarding. Verify that you have the Corp DG device group selected in the device group drop-down list near the top of the window. Click add. For name, enter default. Note that default should be in lowercase letters. Place a check mark in the box for shared. Remember that entries placed into the shared group will appear in all device groups. For description, enter standard log forwarding profile for all security policy rules. In the log forwarding profile window, click Add in the bottom left corner. Panorama opens a new window titled Log Forwarding Profile Match List. For name, enter traffic to Panorama. For description, Enter sends all traffic log file entries to Panorama. Select traffic from the log type drop-down list. Leave the filter set to all logs. Place a check mark in the box for Panorama Cortex Data Lake. Leave the remaining settings unchanged. Click OK to return to the log forwarding profile window. Your default log forwarding profile now has one entry called Traffic to Panorama. In the log forwarding profile window, click Add again. For name, enter URL to Panorama. For description, enter sends all URL log entries to Panorama. For log type, select a URL. Leave the filter set to all logs. Place a check in the box for Panorama Cortex Data Lake. Leave the remaining settings unchanged. Click OK to return to the log forwarding profile window. Your default log forwarding profile now has two entries. In the log forwarding profile window, click Add again. For name, enter threat to Panorama and syslog. For description, enter sends all threat log entries to both Panorama and syslog. For log type, select threat. Leave the filter set to all logs. Place a check mark in the box for Panorama Cortex Data Lake. In the forward method area, beneath the syslog section, click Add. Select syslog servers. Leave the remaining settings unchanged. Click OK to return to the log forwarding profile window. Your default log forwarding profile now has three entries. In the log forwarding profile window, click Add again. For name, enter Wildfire to Panorama. For description, enter sends Wildfire log entries to Panorama. For log type, select Wildfire. Leave the filter set to all logs. Place a check mark in the box for Panorama Cortex Data Lake. Leave the remaining settings unchanged. Click OK to return to the log forwarding profile window. You now have 4 entries in the default log forwarding profile window. Note that you may need to expand the size of the log forwarding profile window to see all 4 entries. In the default log forwarding profile window, click Add. For name, enter threat critical and high to mail. For description, enter sends email to Palo Alto. for critical and high threat events. For log type, select threat. For filter, enter severity EQ critical or severity EQ high in the forward method area. Under the email section, click add. Select email servers. Note: for this entry, you have not selected the box for Panorama Cortex Data Lake. You already have an entry in this default log forwarding profile that sends all threat log events to Panorama. A check mark in the Panorama Cortex Data Lake box in this entry would be redundant. Click OK to return to the log forwarding profile window. You now have 5 entries in the default log forwarding profile window. Take a moment to examine the entries in this default log forwarding profile. Each line is a rule that tells the firewall what to do for entries in specific log files. In this example, the profile tells the firewall to send copies of all traffic, URL, threat, and wildfire log entries to Panorama. The profile also tells the firewall to send copies of the threat log entries to your syslog servers. The last entry in the list tells the firewall to send an email notification with a copy of the log file entry to an email address when the firewall encounters a threat with a critical or high severity level. Click OK to close the default log forwarding profile. Modify security rules to use the default log forwarding profile. Whenever you create a new security policy rule, Panorama automatically will apply the default log forwarding profile. Modify security rules to use the default log forwarding profile. Whenever you create a new security policy rule, Panorama automatically will apply the default log forwarding profile. However, you need to modify existing security policy rules to apply the default log forwarding profile. In Panorama, navigate to Policies greater than Security greater than Post rules. Select Corp DG from the Device Group drop-down list. Click the entry for Allow Internet Access to edit the rule. Select the Actions tab. Under the Log Settings section, change the drop-down list for log forwarding to default. Leave the remaining settings unchanged. Click OK to close the rule. Select HQDG from the Device Group drop-down list. Edit the usersto extranet rule and select the Actions tab. Change the log forwarding drop-down list to default. Leave the other settings unchanged. Click OK. Edit the extranet to internet rule and select the Actions tab. Change the log forwarding drop-down list to default. Leave the other settings unchanged. Click OK. Edit the extranet rule and select the Actions tab. Change the log forwarding drop-down list to default. Leave the other settings unchanged. Click OK. Edit the danger traffic rule and select the Actions tab. Change the log forwarding drop-down list to default. Leave the other settings unchanged. Click OK. Create a new security policy rule. To see the effect of your default log forwarding profile, create a new security policy rule. Select HQDG from the Device Group drop-down list at the top. Select Policies greater than Security greater than Post rules. Click Add. Select the Actions tab. Note that Panorama has already applied the default log forwarding profile for you when you create a new security policy rule. You do not need to complete the process of creating a new rule, so click Cancel. Create Panorama Server profiles. You do not need to complete the process of creating a new rule, so click Cancel. Create Panorama Server profiles. To monitor Panorama itself, you want all Panorama system log events sent to your syslog server. You also want Panorama to send any configuration log events that include the commit command to your email address. To accomplish this task, you must first define a syslog server profile and an email server profile, specifically for Panorama. You might wonder why you cannot simply use the syslog and email server profiles that you defined for use in your firewall log profiles. You can use the same server information, but Panorama needs its own separate set of server profiles for logging purposes. Create the syslog server profile for Panorama to use by selecting Panorama greater than server profiles greater than syslog. Click Add. For name, enter Panorama Syslog. Under the Servers tab, click Add. For name, enter US Syslog. For Syslog Server, enter 192.16850.55. Leave the remaining settings unchanged. Click OK. Create the email server profile for Panorama to use by selecting Panorama greater than server profiles greater than email. Click Add. For name, enter Panorama Email. Leave the location set to Panorama. Under the Servers tab, click Add. For name, enter US Email -1. For email display name, enter Panorama. For from, enter Panorama at panw.lab. For to, enter Palo Alto at panw.lab. For email gateway, enter 192.8, enter 1150. Leave the remaining settings unchanged. Click the Test Connection button. You should receive a message indicating that the test has succeeded. If the test does not succeed, verify the settings for your email server profile and try again. Click Close on the test results window. Click OK. Your email server profile will have a new entry. Click OK to close the email server profile window. Forward Panorama system log events to syslog. You now will configure Panorama to send all system log events to your syslog server. Navigate to Panorama greater than log settings. Under the System section, click Add. For name, enter System Logs to syslog. Leave the filter set to all logs. For description, enter sends all system log events from Panorama to syslog. Under the syslog section, click Add and select Panorama Syslog. Leave the remaining settings unchanged. Click OK. Forward Panorama commit log events to email. With your email server profile in place, you can configure Panorama to send commit events from the configuration log to your email. Under Panorama greater than log settings, locate the configuration section. Click Add. For name, enter commit to email. Enter CMD commit in the filter field. For description, enter sends Panorama commit events to email. Under the email section, click Aid and select Panorama email. Leave the remaining settings unchanged. The filter instructs Panorama to send only configuration log file events that contain the command commit. You can use the filter builder to construct more complex filters. We will examine the filter builder later in the labs. Click OK, commit the configuration, click the commit option in the upper right corner, and then select Commit to Panorama. When the Commit to Panorama window appears, leave the settings unchanged and click Commit. Monitor the status of the commit. When the commit status is complete, click Close. Select the commit icon and choose Push to Devices. Click Edit Selections. Select the Device Groups tab and verify that the checkboxes for the Berlin FW firewall and the Chicago FW firewall are selected. For this exercise, you do not need to use the Force template values or to select either firewall from the Templates tab. We have only made changes to the device groups. Click OK. Click Push to start the process. Wait until the commit all jobs are complete. Click Close. Verify Panorama commit email. In this section, you will make a minor change to the Panorama configuration and commit the change. This action will trigger an email from Panorama to the mail server. In Panorama, navigate to Panorama Setup Management and edit the General Settings section. Add the following line to the login banner: Access attempts recorded. Leave the remaining settings unchanged. Click OK. Click the Commit option in the upper right corner, and then select Commit to Panorama. Click Commit. Monitor the status of the commit. When the commit status is complete, click Close. Note that we are sending only changes to Panorama, so we do not need to push any changes to the managed firewalls. Open a new browser tab in Firefox. From the bookmark bar, select extranet >LabMail. Use PAL242 for name. Enter PAL0 for password. Click Login. You should have at least 2 emails from Panorama in the inbox. One email was the test you sent from Panorama to verify mail connectivity. The other email is a notification about a commit. Click the inbox link on the left. Open the Panorama config alert email to see details about the event. Note that the date and timestamps for the message you see will differ from the example shown here. Click Sign Out in the upper right corner of the email web interface. Close the LabMail browser tab. This exercise is simply an example of how to configure Panorama to send you email notifications for event types. Generate log entries on Chicago Firewall. With your log forwarding profiles in place, you now will run several scripts to generate traffic through the Chicago Firewall. This process will allow you to verify that the firewalls and Panorama are forwarding log file entries correctly. On the Client A workstation, double-click the icon for Test Logs Firewall A to launch the script in a terminal window. Wait until you see that the script has completed before proceeding. #log entry generation complete. Press the Enter key to terminate the script and to close the terminal window. This script generates traffic through the Chicago FW to create entries in the traffic, URL filtering, and threat logs. Close the File Manager window. Run the traffic script on the Berlin workstation. In this section, you will connect to the client behind the Berlin firewall and generate traffic. On Client A, open the Romina application. Double-click the entry for Berlin client. Romina will connect to the Berlin client. Run the following command. B log testing less than enter greater than. Wait until you see that the script has completed before proceeding. Hashtag log entry generation complete. Type exit and press enter to close the SSH connection to the Berlin client. The script generates traffic from the Berlin client through the Berlin firewall to create entries in the traffic, URL filtering, and threat logs. Close the Romina Remote Desktop Client application window. Verify that firewalls forward traffic logs events to Panorama. In Panorama, navigate to monitor greater than traffic. Select Corp DG from the device group drop-down list. Clear any filters you may have in place by clicking the Clear Filter button in the upper right corner of the window. Scroll through the table and note that you have entries from the Chicago FW and Berlin FW devices. Remember that you can customize the columns to view and the order of those columns in any Panorama table. In the preceding example, the device name column has been moved to the far left side of the table. Other columns have been hidden. Select HQDG from the device group drop-down list. Scroll through the table and note that you have entries only from the Chicago FW device. Change the device group drop-down list to branch DG. Both firewalls are forwarding traffic log events to Panorama. Verify that firewalls forward threat events to Panorama. The log forwarding profile you defined instructs firewalls to forward threat log events to Panorama. In this section, you will verify that entries from both firewalls appear in the Panorama threat log. In Panorama, navigate to monitor greater than threat. Select Corp DG from the device group drop-down list. Modify the columns to display only the following items. Move the device name column to the leftmost position. Move the severity column next to the device name. Note vulnerability entries. Both firewalls are forwarding threat log events to Panorama. Remember that you can customize the columns to view and the order of those columns in any Panorama table. Verify that firewalls forward URL filtering logs to Panorama. The log forwarding profile you defined instructs firewalls to forward URL filtering log events to Panorama. In this section, you will verify that entries from both firewalls appear in the Panorama URL filtering log. In the Panorama web interface, navigate to Panorama greater than monitor greater than URL filtering. Select Corp DG from the device group drop-down list. Modify the table to display only the following columns. Move the device name and action columns to the left side of the table. Note entries from the Chicago FW and Berlin FW. Both firewalls are forwarding URL filtering log events to Panorama. Verify threat email from firewalls. The log forwarding profile you defined instructs firewalls to send an email when they encounter a threat with a critical or high severity level. In this section, you will check your lab email account. In the Firefox browser, open a new tab. From the bookmark toolbar, select extranet greater than lab mail. Log in with Palo242 and Pal0 as the credentials. Note emails from Chicago and Berlin firewalls about threats. Open any threat alert email to see details. Note that the date and timestamps you see in the email will differ from the examples shown here. Note that the subject line of the email gives you a synopsis of the message, including the severity, source and destination IP, threat name, threat ID number, and action. Close the threat email message. Sign out of webmail. Close the Mail tab. Stop. This is the end of the lab. Lab 6